groovy.
Hey everybody, Jim here, welcome back. Today we're going to be taking a look at another bunch of import PC Engine games, which I think the PC Engine is a great console to get into if you're interested in collecting imports, because it has a huge library of Japan exclusive games and a lot of them are really good. So let's get started. Last time I was talking about a shooter called Download, so I figured we could ramp the crazy up just a little bit. This is the sequel, Download 2.
And this is a game that I like for a number of different reasons. I think one of the most standout features about it is the story, which is kind of batshit insane. It deals with a group trying to resurrect Adolf Hitler, so you play again as Sid from the first game, and you can dive in and out of people's minds and into computer networks, and the final stage of this game is indeed within the mind of Hitler, so it's like some kind of living nightmare, and then the final boss battle is against some kind of weird, evil Hitler mother brain skull face hybrid thing. So that's pretty cool. But on top of that, it's just a really well-made side-scrolling shooter. It's definitely different from the first game. In the first game, before the start of each level, you have a handful of different weapons to choose from to take into that level. Here you just have 4 different weapons at all time that you can switch between on the fly, so in that way it's kind of like Hellfire for anyone who's played Hellfire on the Mega Drive or Hellfire S on the PC Engine. Except in that game, basically switching your weapon just changes the direction that your laser fires in. This, all 4 weapons are distinct from each other. So you have a Vulcan shot, homing shot, a laser, and a more powerful short-range laser, and you get a shield that you can pick up, and helper options that fire additional homing shots. The controls are pretty smooth. The gameplay is challenging, but not frustratingly so, and it's just very fun overall. The graphics are good, the cutscenes are really cool. Some of them go for a bit more of like a psychedelic look, I guess you could say, when Sid is diving into people's brains. And the soundtrack is amazing too. Very good hard rock soundtrack. One of my favorite soundtracks on a PC Engine CD, actually. So all the way around, this is a really good game. It has gotten more expensive recently, unfortunately. A few years ago, this was like a $30 game. Now, I think at a minimum, you'll be expected to pay like $70, upwards of $100, which is pretty steep. But if you can afford it and you do like shooters, I would say go with this one. It's really good.
Download 2, a great shooter with an odd premise, one I'd highly recommend picking up and playing. Next up, another shooter, this one in a classic series of shooters by Konami. This is Pt.2.
And this is a series that as a whole has kind of a special place in my heart. I've been a big fan of the Twinbee games for a long time, and I know that when people think of Konami shoot-em-ups, they immediately think of Gradius, and for good reason, but for me, Twinbee has always been kind of the underappreciated shooter series for Konami. I guess I can put it that way. This version of Pt.2 plays at least as good as the Super Famicom version, I would say. The controls are really smooth. The difficulty is definitely challenging but fair, and I do like that you have multiple levels of enemies to worry about, so those directly in front of you and then those below you that you have to drop bombs on. And it also maintains the usual Twinbee power-up system with multicolored bells that can be shot to change the color, and each color gives you a different power-up. Some people don't really care for this power-up system. I do. I feel like it makes the gameplay a little more frantic, and it definitely makes it unique from other shooters out there, so I can definitely say I like the gameplay in Pt.2 very much. It's not really anything different from any other Twinbee game, so if you've played a handful of them, this one isn't anything new, but it's the only Twinbee game on the PC Engine, so for that reason alone, it's definitely worth playing. Plus, the graphics are fantastic. The soundtrack is really good. As far as the quality goes, I was really impressed that for a HuCard game, they got this kind of sound quality out of it, and as just for the arrangements, it's 16-bit Konami, so it's obviously going to be great. So all around, just fantastic graphics, fantastic sound design. The gameplay is classic Twinbee. It's really fun. So this is one I would recommend. As far as price goes, I'd say at the very least you'll be expected to pay about $40 for a complete copy, and it can go up to as much as $70, which I think is excessive. I don't think it's worth quite that much, but it is a great game. If you like to collect shooters for the PC Engine, as I do, then this is one you'll want to look into.
Pt.2 Twinbee, another great shooter, quality stuff from Konami, highly recommended. Next up, a PC Engine port of an NES classic. This is KidShoryuken II.
And this is a game that I don't really have to say too much about the gameplay, because this is the PC Engine port of the original NES version of Ninja Gaiden. So if you've played Ninja Gaiden, you've more or less played this game. I don't think it controls exactly the same as the NES version. Maybe it's slightly less responsive, but it's nothing too terribly noticeable. This game does still play really well, and the level layouts are pretty much the exact same, and so are the bosses, and the difficulty is still very high. Pretty much, yeah, just a PC Engine 16-bit version of Ninja Gaiden. So you get upgraded graphics, obviously. This is a very good looking game, but I will say that there are some weird kind of jarring scrolling effects in certain stages. It does not scroll smoothly, it scrolls only when you're moving, so it has kind of a weird effect. But other than that, I would say that this game does feature some pretty damn good graphics. The soundtrack is also really good. They do not update the original NES soundtrack. Instead, this game has its own original soundtrack, which I don't think is as good as the NES game. The songs don't have quite the same punch to them. They don't have the same memorable melodies, but there are still some really good tracks in this game, and the cutscenes are still here, and they look good too. Again, a nice 16-bit upgrade. So if you're a big Ninja Gaiden fan and you want to play a 16-bit version of that original Ninja Gaiden, I would recommend playing this game. Again, downside, and I'm sorry, I'm not doing this on purpose, I'm just picking games that I think would be interesting for PC Engine owners or prospective PC Engine owners, but this game has become pretty damn expensive in recent years. It's at least a $100 game at this point, which I think is really excessive. But again, if you're a big Ninja Gaiden fan and you want to replay the original but with some updated graphics and a different soundtrack, things like that, then this is one that I would say definitely check it out.
KidShoryuken II, great game that's a respectable port of the NES and Famicom original. I'd highly recommend playing that one. Next up, a great game that spawned a great series of games. This is Kiki Kai Kai.
And for those who don't know, this would eventually go on to become the Pocky and Rocky series for the Super Nintendo, which are known to be some really fun games, but also pretty pricey. So this game doesn't play altogether different from those. It's still a top-down run-and-gun game, but instead of guns, you have talisman cards that you throw at your enemies, and you have sort of a wand that you can wave in front of you and use as a short-range melee attack. There are some power-ups in this game that increase the range of your attack and the strength of it, but there are no real like over-the-top weapons or super bombs or anything like that. Really, the point of the game is to navigate your way through each stage, kill as many of the enemies as you can, collect a key, and then go on to the boss battle. And then after you kill the boss, you move on to the next stage. It's not a very long game. I think it's only like 5 stages, keeping in mind that it was an arcade game at first. So even though it's not very long, though, you have limited continues, and it is pretty challenging, so it's not very likely that you're gonna breeze through this game on your first try. It'll probably take you a little while to finish it, actually. So it is challenging. It is fun. Graphically, I would say it looks good for what the game is. Nothing terribly impressive, but I do kind of like, the cute designs of the characters and enemies, and the bosses are actually pretty big character sprites that look pretty nice. So graphically, this isn't like a very impressive game, but I think just for what the game is, it's definitely passable. The soundtrack is pretty good too. The sound design overall sounds nice. The music, though, I guess they're going for more of like a creepy Japanese feel, kind of spooky, because the game does take place in like various temples and cemeteries and deals with ghosts and monsters and things like that. So I do like the sound design, I do like the graphics, and the gameplay is very fun. Again, a more simplified version of the later Pocky and Rocky games. Again, this is a game that's become pretty damn expensive in recent years. I would say it's like $100 minimum for a complete copy. Loose cards are obviously going to be less, but if you like your games complete, this is, like a $100 to $150 game, which is really pricey, but for someone who enjoys this type of game, I mean, if you were willing to spend hundreds of dollars on a Pocky and Rocky game, you might be willing to spend $100 or so on this one because it is really fun.
Kiki Kai Kai, very fun game, definitely worth picking up and playing if you can afford it. It's awesome. And finally, I wanted to finish off with another game in the Kunio-kun series. This is Downtown Neketsu Koshinkyoku.
And this is a game in the Kunio-kun series that was also released on the Famicom, and the Famicom version also did not get a release outside of Japan, which is too bad because this game is really fun. I would say if you played Crash and the Boys Street Challenge on the NES, this is kind of like a more simplified, shorter version of that. Essentially, you have 4 teams to choose from, and there are a series of sporting events like a foot race that goes all over the neighborhood and climbing up poles to reach the top, but everyone can climb up and knock each other off, and it's like a scramble to the top. And there are a couple of other events as well. So it's just a fun, wacky, sporting event game, I guess you could say. It's also a 4-player game, which is really cool. I haven't gotten a chance to try the 4-player mode yet, but it does seem like it would be pretty fun because this is kind of like a frantic, fast-paced, like scramble to the finish kind of game. So 4 players would be really cool, I do imagine. Also, the graphics are great. You get the classic kind of like 8-bit Technos Japan style with all the Kunio-kun characters that I really like. So again, if you played stuff like Crash and the Boys or River City Ransom, stuff like that, you'll recognize the graphics and characters right away. And if you like it as much as I do, that's a big positive. Also, the soundtrack is excellent. All of these Technos Japan games had really great music, and the PC Engine CD versions are just especially notable because they take those original 8-bit chiptune soundtracks and then upgrade them to CD quality, and it sounds really nice. So this is a game that I would recommend for a quick bit of fun for single player or 4 players if you can manage that. It's definitely a very good, very fun game. Also, finally, a game that isn't terribly expensive. You can find complete copies of this game on eBay for less than $30. I would say it's worth that. If you're a big fan of this series like I am, this is one I would say you're going to want to have in your collection.
Downtown Neketsu Koshinkyoku, very fun game, highly recommend playing it. It's awesome. And that's it, 5 more PC Engine games that I would recommend importing and playing. Thanks for watching. Let me know down in the comments what some of your favorite PC Engine games are, and what are some PC Engine games that are on your wish list. I'd like to know. And until next time, thanks for watching, everybody. Take care. Goodbye.